Hey, this is AJ with Blackhawk Bushcraft. Thank you so much for visiting the channel. Today I want to talk about knives and knife grinds, knife designs. For those starting out with bushcraft and survival, the number of knives and tools available can seem pretty overwhelming, I'm sure. For those of us that have been in bushcraft and survival for quite some time, we typically have something like this. I refer to it as the bag. And this represents a very large collection of knives that I've purchased over time. Some that work very well, some that I don't really care for, but what you usually find is for those that have been in the hobby and lifestyle for quite some time, we always have a tendency to pick up knives that we envision using in our very familiar bushcraft atmospheres, but when it comes down to it, it's just not necessary to have as many knives as we accumulate over time or the amount of money that we spend on them. But I wanted to offer some suggestions for those starting out related to some knives that I've accumulated over time, some really great designs out there, some that aren't that great, and hopefully give you some guidance as you look to purchase tools to find some things that will work out very well for you and allow your dollars to stretch perhaps even a little bit further. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some great knives that you can spend some money on, which is fine. And sometimes you just have to treat yourself to a really nice knife. And there's nothing wrong with that either. But for those starting out, if money's tight, there are some great inexpensive options that will serve you well, even over time and as you further your skills and development within bushcraft and survival disciplines. You'll still find yourself really loving some of the very inexpensive items that are out there. So I'm just going to reach into my bag and just start pulling them out and talk a little bit about what I have. So this right here, this is one of my all-time favorites. And this is my LT Wright Genesis with a Scandi-ground. This is a great knife for bushcraft. I think it's about 4.5 inches in blade length, and it's 1/8 inch thick. This is made from A2 steel, and again, the blade is a Scandi-ground, which basically means that you have a bevel here, not quite so much as like what a Saber Grind would offer you, but it's basically you're flat, and then you have a very nice bevel to what they call a zero grind, which means there is no secondary edge on this. Now, over time, it's probably more convexed than it is zero ground. But the benefit of a Scandi-ground is wood processing, carving, those types of things, where Scandi-grinds don't perform very well depending on the thickness of the blade stock. Now, this one isn't very bad because it is only 1/8 of an inch thick. But Scandi-grinds on thick stock make terrible slicers and food prep. Now, you can get by with them, and believe me, I have. It really doesn't matter what you're trying to accomplish. If you have a knife, you can get by. But where these knives with Scandi-grinds excel are with wood processing, carving, feather sticking, and I'm a huge fan of Scandi-grind knives. Doesn't mean that other knife designs and grinds don't work well, but that's probably my preference for bushcraft-related tasks. Okay, this one right here is my trailing point High Falls, made by Bark River for a gentleman by the name of Jesse Hemphill. And this is a Saber convexed grind. You can see the similarities between the two. You have your Scandi-ground, which has a bevel, and then your Saber Grind, which is pretty much between a full flat grind and a Scandi-ground. But this is a convex grind, meaning that it doesn't come down to a very flat taper and then has a secondary edge on it like you would with a Saber Grind or a flat grind, but it rounds down on each side. So instead of the point looking like this and then the secondary bevel kind of going like this, what a convex grind allows you to do on the edge is round. And what that does is reinforces the edge and puts a lot of steel behind the edge so that it makes the edge very, very strong. Now, you can probably tell with the design of this knife. Have I used this for bushcraft related tasks? Absolutely, but this is a knife designed for hunting and particularly for game processing and skinning. The convex grind allows the edge to have a lot of strength, which is needed if you're having to split rib cages or process game, separate bone, those types of things. And then the trailing point, and when I'm talking about trailing point, those are knives that will have an upsweep where the point is higher than the spine. So that is a trailing point design. And those are excellent for skinning. So if you ever see like a trailing point design in a knife style that is like this, the giveaway is that that is designed as a hunting knife. So that's another option out there. If you're wanting something more geared toward game processing and hunting, but could also accomplish some camp tasks, that's a great option. Okay, so the Genesis and the High Falls. What do we got here? Okay, this is another bushcraft designed knife with a Scandi-ground. This is the Enzo Trapper. I think you have about a 3.5, maybe just shy of 4 inches blade length. This is an 01 tool steel, and I think it's about 3.5 millimeters thick. So again, very awesome knife for bushcraft, wood processing, shelter building related tasks. If you're needing to notch and feather stick and do those types of things. Where this one does not excel is this is a terrible slicer. So if you're trying to slice something and need high performance with slicing, trying to slice a potato with this thing, it just pretty much splits it. Once the edge digs in, because of the nature of the bevel of the Scandi-ground, it's meant to really dig into the material, which is why they excel in carving. But for slicing, not so much. But this is also a really great bushcraft knife. Next one out of the bag. This is my T5 by Lion Steel, and this is a Saber Grind. You can tell because a full flat grind would be from the top of the spine down to the edge would be completely planed and flat. This starts up high and then is a flat ground down to the edge, which I've also convexed off to make it stronger. This is the Lion Steel T5. This is made out of Nylox, which is a type of stainless steel. Very awesome steel. This is a great knife. The design of this is more geared toward kind of tactical survival, but I have used this in many bushcraft and those types of settings. It will not perform in the same way that even something like this would perform. Just your simple $20 Moro companion, 1/8 inch thick, Scandi-ground. In bushcraft use, this one actually I find performs better than something like this, although this is a great knife. Now I completely understand that there's going to be some YouTube troll that's willing to add their degrading comments that I don't know what I'm talking about and you can't baton with something like a bushcraft Moro. They're not Full-tang. I'm just going to say it, and I'm sure I'm probably going to get some hate on the channel for saying this, but I do not advocate for nor advocate against batoning. Some knife companies build their knives stout enough for those individuals that like to take their knife and pound it through logs and chop with it and pry with it and pound it into a tree and stand on it. They're built to be able to do those types of things. For one, I'm not a huge batoner. Even with a knife like this, I carry either a hunting axe or a hatchet. And I know I'll probably get some comments, well, that's just weight, unnecessary weight if you can use your knife. I'm really not a one-tool option guy. And again, if that is your thing, that's great. But I don't advocate all the time for a Full-tang knife, even though a Full-tang knife is going to be stronger. Of course, there's no dispute there. But if you're not into batoning and the practice of needing to pound your knife through a log of wood all the time, you can get away with something that's not full-tang, like a Moro. And anybody that disputes the quality and efficacy and benefit of having a Moro for bushcraft, even survival tasks, I don't know what you're smoking. They're one of the best knives around there. And they're made very well, full-tang or not. It really doesn't matter to me. I wouldn't ever think of trying to pound this through a log. And I've even seen some companies out there that build their knives extremely stout. Lion Steel, for one, this knife would be built for very heavy abuse. Other companies out there, Tops out of Idaho, SE knives, they have a lineup that is extremely strong. But I've seen some idiots out there on YouTube that have put those knives through abuse that you should never put on a knife, and have destroyed them, and then complain about the knife, that it's the knife's fault that it didn't work or whatever, because of user idiocy and not using the knife the way that the knife should be used. Again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with batoning. If it works for you, great. If that is the case, find a knife that works in those situations. If you're not into batoning, you can get away with a whole bunch of very awesome knives that are not full-tang, that are still used and have been used in cultures, specifically Finnish designed knives that are more stick-tang and peened through the handle versus full-tang designs or even partial tang designs that the cultures in those areas have been using for generations. So understand your knife and the limitations. This kind of leads me to this next knife that I have here. One of my favorite large fixed blade knives. This is the Cold Steel Recon Scout. And again, I've seen some real hate on this knife. One channel in particular that I really love, the gentleman was reviewing this knife and was using it for bushcraft related applications. Well, look at the knife. It's a flat ground knife, planed from the spine to the edge with a secondary bevel. It has almost a sharpened swedge right here. And what does this knife tell you by the design? Is this built to accomplish the same things that this would accomplish? Can it accomplish some of the same things that this can accomplish? And can this accomplish some of the same things that this can accomplish? Absolutely. But what does this design just scream to you? This is a combat survival knife. More leaning toward combat, and survival is a secondary. Hence, the double Quillian, so that when you're thrusting and stabbing, your hand is locked into the knife and not sliding up toward the blade. Almost sharpened swedge here. If I were to run my finger very quickly across this or like this, I guarantee you that swedge is going to cut me, even though it's not fully sharpened. But why the swedge? It's for piercing capability. Why the flat grind? For slicing capability. So you'll see in a lot of tactical and combat designs and applications, you're either going to be dealing with a saber grind or a full flat grind. The Army, in most cases, is not going to be carrying a small little Scandi-ground knife for combat applications. We're talking 7.5 inches here. Now, do I love this knife? Absolutely. It's great, but understand the knife and what it's designed for, and you'll be happy with it. Just like this guy on his channel was really complaining about this knife, that it was beating up his batons and getting up here under the choil, and feather sticking was awkward because you got the Quillian sticking in your hand and it creates hot spots and all that jazz. Well, duh. It's not designed for that purpose. So don't throw hate out on a knife if you're trying to apply the use of that knife to a situation and expect the same comfort as the LT Wright Genesis. You know, it doesn't make any sense to me, but it is what it is. People are entitled to their opinions as well as I am. But anyways, so there's that knife. Here's another one. This one also made by Bark River for a company called American Knife Company. And this design right here is akin to the Skookum bush tool style knives. This is very much geared toward bushcraft and has what's called a Scandi grind, which means that the Scandi grind is convexed to the edge. So instead of a flat grind Scandi, it's convexed. And this is also a really great option. I think this is 5 inches in blade length, maybe a little bit long. For bushcraft, I have a tendency to really appreciate, you know, usually 4.5, but it really doesn't feel awkward in the hand. So that's another option. Okay, what do we got here? This is another Moro Companion. Kind of already talked about that. How about this one? Saber Grind. This is the Shadow Eagle by Tops. You can tell by the design, swedge, Saber Grind. This is combat, tactical, designed for those types of applications. This is my EDC. I typically carry this when I'm also packing. So yeah, that's what this is. Whoa, about knocked the camera over. How about this one? The Strawman Gluco, I think 7.5 inch Gluco. Scandi-ground, also known as the Sami knife. This is not a Full-tang knife, nor do I care. Those people have been showing that their knives work regardless. Very great knife, high carbon steel. I have no issues. I would use this, and if this is the only knife I had in a bushcraft setting, I wouldn't be disappointed. This is a great knife. Okay, what else do we got? Okay, this is a custom out of a guy in New York. This is a full flat grind on both sides with a convex secondary bevel that I put on there. Love-hate relationship with this knife. My hands, I have kind of medium to large, but not like super extra large, but man, the finger groove up here is just, it just feels awkward. I can get a full 2 fingers in there to choke up on this knife. Now this knife is 1/8 of an inch thick. This is a great knife. I've had a lot of great fun using this knife in an outdoor setting. It is an exceptional slicer, and it processes wood very well too, as far as carving and feather sticking applications. Is it my favorite? No. It feels awkward in the hand, and it's not the most comfortable to use, but it is what it is. Okay. What else we got? Move all the sheaths out of the way. I'm running out of space. Okay, here we have the Tramatina machete. Also not a knife that I reach for because I live in Utah, and in the mountainous and desert regions, there's just not a whole lot of use for a very thin, flexible machete like, you know, the Tramatina. These would be great in jungle and vegetation situations. Okay. Oh, this is one of my favorites. This is another Moro Scandi-ground. This is the Moro 911. And if you look at that, those of you that understand Moros, you'll see that this is very much akin to the Bushcraft Black. Same handle design, same blade design. I think the Bushcraft Black probably is about 1/8 of an inch thick. This is not, it's slightly under that. But this knife I have had forever, and it is one of my all-time favorites. I probably navigate to this knife more than any other. Extremely light, durable, comfortable, and it just works. I love this knife. Okay. Now we're getting down to some of the more non-practical applications. This one I just had to pick up because it was awesome. This is 12 inches. This is the Condor Dundee Bowie, and I don't really use this much. I just go out and have fun with this one. It's a lot of knife, and I picked it up because it was a fun knife to add to my collection. I hated the black coating, so I stripped that off and gave it a patina, and then leather wrapped the handle. But that's a fun knife there. But for somebody that is into really oversized, large, that ain't a knife, this is a knife type of knife application, it's a great knife. Don't have any complaints about it. Okay, how about this is another one too. This is the Condor Bowl machete. Again, a fun knife, machete design, very heavy in the hand. If I were in the jungle, I don't think I would go with something this thick. It really, I don't know. It was a fun knife, and I picked it up because of having, liking the design, the way that they, you know, put this on the blade. These things, the thing with Condor, if you've ever owned a Condor, you know, they don't even ever come paper sharp. So I worked the edge with the work sharp, you know, improved the handle a little bit. But that's just another fun knife, but does not see a lot of use. You know, some people, I think, have used these how you would an Essie Hunglas. It's just awkward, and it's not very comfortable to use over time. The stock is just too thick to be useful. If you were chopping with it all the time, maybe, but outside of, you know, heavy chopping tasks, yeah, whatever. Okay. Oh, here's a good one. This right here, the Falcon S1X. This is what you would call a Saber convexed grind. And they do that again to strengthen the blade. This is laminated cobalt steel. This is an exceptional knife for survival settings. But look at that stock. Can we say, oh my thick? Yeah. I wouldn't recommend something like this in a bushcraft setting per se. Not that you couldn't use it for that. It's an exceptional knife. It's just very thick. I don't find the handle scales too comfortable. I'd like to actually get some that are a little bit thicker. It feels very thin in the hand. The scales are so thin. Would I be happy if this was the only knife that I had? Absolutely. Falcon makes great knives, but it would not be my first choice out of those that I own for bushcraft applications. But this knife isn't going anywhere. I will keep this one forever. Okay, what else do we got in this bag? Oh, here's another one. Bushcraft style knife. This is the TBS Boar. This one does not see a lot of use. This has a Scandi-ground, but it is so steep and thick and just doesn't work. It's hair shaving sharp. It fails at slicing. If they could have brought the Scandi-ground a little bit higher and narrowed it out, it would be so much better. It's very comfortable, but outside of that, this one just does not see a lot of use. I would not recommend picking up a TBS Boar as a bushcraft knife. It just doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't work for me. I'll just leave it at that. Okay. And the last of my lineup that I'll show for right now is this. This is the Sly Steel Survival Kukri. I picked this up because I really do like recurves. This look like a very unique, interesting blade. But quite honestly, I have never felt inclined to carry this. I knew that would be the case when I bought it. Got in on a Sly Steel pre-order. This knife just is not me, and it just got caught in a weak moment of wanting to spend some money on another knife to go into the bag that would just sit there and collect dust. Well, this is it. This would probably feel more at home in the hands of somebody more inclined toward your TV reality, survival, oversized knife, jimping, you know, all the bells and whistles, bow drill divot in the handle, all that jazz. I thought I would really maybe find a love for a knife like this in a setting where a larger knife would make sense. But gosh, this is one of those knives that I have had a lot of buyer's remorse purchasing, and quite frankly would not feel sad if I sold this to somebody who is into these types of kind of gimmicky is not the right word, because it really is a very well-built tool. But for me, simple is better. I'm just not into all the bells and whistles anyways. So with all of these that I've collected over time, that I use, that I've gone through a lot of knives, I've sold a lot of knives, I've picked up other knives. That's kind of the nature of the beast. You either add to your collection or you recycle from your collection to pick up others that will sit in the bag for a while until you decide to sell them or use them. Which ones do I gravitate toward the most? Well, you can probably tell by the grind, the types of grind that I have on most of my knives. I'm a fan of the Scandi-ground, a thinner blade, Scandi-ground. And which one do I find myself gravitating toward the most? Probably this one, my 911. Even if I'm carrying a larger knife, I keep my 911 with me as a neck knife. It is always around my neck. And I think I picked this one up years ago for under $12. And that's the point that I want to make. If you're just looking for a really great bushcraft knife and you're not intending on abusing it past its limits and using it for what the knife is intended to accomplish, you will never go wrong with a Moro. The Companion HD, which has a little bit of a thicker stock, Moros are great, inexpensive options if that's what you're just looking to get into. Now, if you are wanting something that is a little bit more robust and built to take more abuse, then there's great options out there. LT Wright puts out some great knives, or I guess it's not Blind Horse anymore, but Battle Horse knives, Essie, Tops, the Beckers. There are so many options out there to choose from. And at that point, if you're not apprehensive of spending a little bit of money on a higher end knife and treating yourself to something a little bit more high end, you've got lots and lots of options. And the thing that I would say is choose the knife based on how you intend to use it. I probably wouldn't go out and buy the Recon Scout if you really like this design and think, well, I'm going to get that and then I'm going to just make do and use it for everything, and I'm going to use it as an improvised axe, and I'm going to use it for bushcraft and survival. Probably wouldn't recommend getting a combat knife in that application unless you find yourself in situations where carrying a combat knife makes sense. If bushcraft and camping are your thing, you might gravitate towards something a little bit differently. Something like a Luku, whether it's Full-tang or not. You might want Full-tang, you might not. You might find yourself, as you get into knives and get out in the field and put some time behind them, you might really find something that has a full flat grind works really well for you, and you like it better than something like a Scandi-ground. There's nothing wrong with that. You might find that, oh my gosh, the first time I used a Falcon knife, and I just really fell in love with that convex edge. That is just incredible. That's completely fine too. And that will just come with time. I would say don't go blow a bunch of money on a bunch of knives off the get-go. Find something to start out with, determine how much you like it, and then just, you know, if you have the opportunity or someone that you know has different knives and you find yourself out in the field, you know, give it a chance. I've heard a lot of people that hate the T5. But with this Lion Steel T5 Saber Grind, I've carried this knife out and about many, many times. It's seen some really good use. And this is one that, you know, it's not geared toward bushcraft. It's geared more toward kind of survival tactical situations, but it's not necessarily a combat knife because it's pretty short at only 5 inches, but it just works. And so this is what you'll find is using a knife, what somebody says, oh, I hate that knife, it doesn't work for me. Hey, that's not a problem. That's what's so great about having so many different knife designs and knife makers out there, is you will start to learn what you have a tendency to gravitate toward. In my case, a good Scandi edge, man, I love the Scandi-ground, but it doesn't mean that I don't like the other grinds and don't have applications for them. So hopefully this gives you a little something to think about. You don't have to spend a lot of money on knives. If you're just starting out, I highly recommend the Moro. Now, if you're wanting something more full-tang, you could go with the Moro Garberg. You could go with the, what's it called? The Jacari Puukko Varusteleka, a company out in Finland that makes a really great full-tang knife. You may want to start off full-tang right from the get-go, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Choose the knife based on how you intend to use it. And if you're the type that feels like I probably am not going to be carrying a hunting axe or a hatchet with me, and I want a knife that I can just pound through and process wood as needed, then there's nothing wrong with that. If you're more like me, where you carry a saw and usually a couple knives and a hunting axe or a hatchet, and that is your discipline or your preference, there's nothing wrong with not going full-tang. Now, some people would disagree with me and say, oh, I would never get anything less than a full-tang knife. And if that is what they feel, that's completely acceptable. I'm not saying that they're wrong, and I'm not saying that I'm right, but there are a lot of great knives out there to choose from. So with that being said, I appreciate your time. Please like and subscribe. Please feel free to add your comments. Even if you disagree with me, you always have the trolls that show up that have to say something. And if that's what you feel you need to do, by all means, all comments are welcome. Even through some of the really disparaging comments that have been left, there's been some takeaways, even from some of those types of comments. So just really appreciate your support in visiting the channel today. Hopefully something that I shared was of use to you. Thanks so much for watching.